Hey folks, it's your main man Sabado back again, back in action. Hey, today I want to take some time out and really just have a personal conversation with you. I generally try to put together these well thought through scripts that take a pragmatic view of what my life is like on a day to day basis, dealing with early retirement, not going into work, and really trying to help and inspire you all out there in your struggles to try to get to a place of financial independence and hopefully retiring early. And the idea is even if you can't retire early, you do have the opportunity and the expectation for me to live your best life. But I'll tell you, it's just getting harder than hell out here right now to really do this. I've been thinking about this for the last few weeks, and I know that in a lot of my videos I talk about not wanting to get political and not wanting to make statements that are going to be construed as being a statement that's pushing a political agenda. But enough is enough. The reality is right now we're sitting at an unprecedented time, and people like myself, and I'm sure many of you out there, are just trying to figure out enough is enough. I think that when you look at our current politics in America. I have feelings about politics in America, but I think I have my bigger concerns are just with people in America. We could do better. We have to do better. We spend all of our time going to other countries and talking to them about what they should do, and we go to other countries and we're an example of what human rights stewardship or economic stewardship or any of that other stuff is. But now we're in a situation where we have a self-inflicted pain that is really going to put a lot of people on the street. And there's going to be a lot of people that don't get health care. There's going to be a lot of countries that can't fight infectious disease because of these moves. And I want to make sure that I'm clear about it. That I in no way support, nor do I believe any of this stuff is good. I think that when a person is arguing about politics, I think there are political components that people can argue about, but these are not politics as usual. What these are is this is a culture war. And so ultimately, it really depends on what side of the culture that you're on. And I know I'm going to get comments that are going to have a bunch of things to say. And, I really don't give a shit, because the fact of the matter is when I take a look objectively at what's happening across America, if you're not feeling this pain, then you're just an idiot. And I don't have time for that. I can't try to convince, to give you some perspective. And I promise I'll get into the content after this. But to get into the perspective, one of the things that I told people during the election was that I wasn't going to argue politics. And I wasn't going to argue politics because when you're dealing with Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian types of issues, then you have different ways of solving some of the same problems. But the way that this has set up is this is really a culture war, and it's one person against everybody else. I think there are other people that see themselves as having an opportunity to maybe getting something out of it. But the reality of it is it's one person against everybody else. And as soon as the rest of those people aren't useful to that one person, then they're going to get pushed out just like it's been in the past. And, when you can't argue with somebody about their value system. And if a person's value system is such that it thinks that these types of things are okay, then there's no argument that I can have. And, and this probably isn't the channel for you, because this would be the channel that is really about making sure that everybody has the opportunity, that we all as Americans have the opportunity to at least understand and make decisions based on information that's going to help us get to a place that we want to be from somebody who's gotten there in a very down to earth kind of way. So, but more important than how I feel about everything going on is I wanted to talk to you folks a little bit about, how I'm dealing with what I would call this economic collapse, because Some of us are insulated in some ways from some of the instances, but none of us are insulated fully. So I thought I would share with you today how I'm dealing with it, and some of the steps that I'm taking, and some of the things that I have to really take a look at. In the world of early retirement, there's this thing called the sequence of returns. And basically what it says is you don't want to take the heaviest losses early in your retirement because they have an impact that reaches further into your retirement. Well, the reality is today the market was down 2,200 points. Now, this is the fifth largest drop, I believe, in history of the Dow Jones in a single day. So I say all that to say that it's there. I'm probably the furthest from being an alarmist. I'm just not that guy. My wife will tell you I don't panic about much, but I do think there's something to be said about what's going on. And I do think that there are people out there that are struggling right now. When your Social Security check is late, that's a problem. If you have a job where you're relying on government grants, that's a problem. If you spent the last 9.5 years of your life in public service so you can have a student loan forgiven, and now you don't know if that's going to happen or not, that's a problem. And a lot of us will say, and I get the trolls all the time, but I know a lot of the trolls are going to say, well, people shouldn't go to school if they can't afford it. Yeah, that all sounds good, but that's just not the way that it goes. And so, so I think that, if you look at student loan repayment programs, and again, I was an HR guy. I was the head of HR for a fairly decent sized organization. So I speak from the position of knowledge, but a lot of those folks that get the student loans, the federal student loan repayments and stuff, they work in healthcare. A lot of your physicians, a lot of your dentists, a lot of your doctors. And one of the ways that you get them to work at like federally qualified health centers or at to work with lower income populations, like those on Medicaid and those on Medi-Cal and other state sponsored healthcare programs, is you give them the opportunity to have their student loans paid off, because going to medical school costs you a few $100,000. So if you end up not having to pay that, you're in a good shape. So, but again, these are all real things, and these are things that are affecting people in a real way. And so I just wanted to have a real conversation with you about what I'm doing. So, the first thing I'm focusing on is I'm really focusing on remembering my plan. I talk about it in all my videos, and I really have this aversion to saying the same thing over and over again, because I know if I'm listening to me, I wouldn't want to hear myself say the same thing over and over again. But one of the things that is worth repeating is that your plan should be set up in such a way that it takes into account market downswings. Now, there's different types of market downswings, and COVID, for example, was a market downswing, but there was a specific event and that turned back around. We don't really know. This is unprecedented right now. So we don't really know what's the outcome of this is going to be. Now, I don't think that the powers that be are going to allow it to get to where every company in America is worth $0.00, creating $0 portfolios. But I do think there are people that are relying on their portfolio now. And so it's really important that when you put together that plan, if you heard anything about me, and again, I don't claim to be a financial guru. I don't play one on TV. I don't even joke around like I'm one. But I do know a thing or two about how to save money, which is one of the things that my financial advisor helped us with. And the one thing I talk about all the time is diversifying. I was reading an article today where they talked about the Dow being down 1,600 points, but bonds are up. And I tell you that because if you have a portfolio that has stocks and bonds, then you have the opportunity to mitigate some of those losses. And I know we have a large part of our portfolio that is tax-free municipals. And what's nice about those is we put those in our emergency fund. So in our emergency fund, when everything else is going down, we have those to be able to pull from to help us with expenses through the time of economic uncertainty. So, remember that plan. Make sure that you're diversified. make sure that you remember that your plan was designed for times like this. I have a few friends of mine that recently were looking for jobs. And so it's funny because when one of them asked me about finding another job and which job they should take, I said, well, did you get one yet? And the reason I asked that question to them is because this person is about 10 years older than me, maybe a couple years more older, or I'm sorry, younger than me. And so most of their working life has been from the period of about 2010 to now. And if you recall, 2010 was when we started to peel ourselves out of the great financial crisis. People started getting jobs and the market started going up. So you had this era, this decade or so of economic prosperity that ensued as a result of that. Well, the if you haven't been, if you didn't come into the workforce before that, or if you were like, let's say in my generation where you had to go through the economic downturns of the 90s, the economic downturn of the 2000s, 2001, 2008, and 2020, then now, then it's hard to get your head around the fact that you plan for these things, but you plan for them. Now, if your whole source of income is based on just stocks, then the question becomes, did you diversify when you could? But the key is just remember that you have that plan, and it's less about what the actual outcome is, but it's so you don't panic. Because if you panic, you're going to do yourself, you're not going to do yourself any favors. The second thing I think you should do, and that we're doing to deal with this economic collapse, and again, I shouldn't call it a collapse because it hasn't collapsed yet. We don't know how long it's going to last, but it appears to be on the precipice of a significant financial event. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and we're going to continue to use the word collapse. Thank you, and let's keep going. So the second thing we're doing is we're really reviewing our spending plan. When we put together, and we're not immune to anything I talk about on this channel is usually because I learned it, and I might have learned it the hard way. But one of the things that I'm taking a look at is I'm taking a look at my spending plan. I don't know that my spending plan took into account these kind of swings. Now, they did, but they took into account smaller swings and moderate inflation. But we've got a huge swing, and we're about to have some big inflation. And so I don't know what the impact of that's going to be. So the one part of that I can control is my spending. There's a few things I think about when I think about my spending. One of them is, and many of you know because I've put videos up about it, but we have a nice RV. We have a 36-foot Fleetwood Bounder. And so we go on these vacations and we go and we drive, but what we found is we don't go on RV trips as much as we thought we would for a variety of reasons, but just primarily because when you retire, you're able to be at home, you're able to relax, you're in the most relaxing spaces that you want to be all the time because you control where you are. So to go and get into an RV, go to an RV park, get dirty at the RV park, and sleep in a bed that's not quite my bed at home, none of which are horrible things, but they take away from the luster of vacations. I think I mentioned in one of my early videos, vacations just hit different. Now we are going on a vacation to to Alaska in a bit. And so when we go to Alaska and we go on our cruise, that'll be a different situation because cruises are like resorts and you have the ability to relax. But again, you still have to get up, get on a flight, get to the destination, wait in line and do all those. So why do all those things when I could just relax at home? I mean, I'm just keeping it a buck with you. Then the other area is our casino trips. My wife and I, we love going to the casino. So what we did is beginning around November or so, we started to go to our casinos and we realized we were losing and we didn't want to spend all of our money. We figured, well, it's not going to be good times forever. So what we did is every casino has some type of giveaway. And so some of those casinos, you have to get a certain number of points. So you play $100 or $200 and you get the gift, win or lose. And other ones, because we spent money at the casino prior, we now have the ability to get those gifts for free. So there's about 4 casinos in our area. So what we do is they send us all the stuff in the mail. We'll go to the casino, and if we have to play, then we'll play the amount that we have to play, which is nice because it's the beauty of casinos is when you're forced to stop, that's when you stop. But if you're not forced to stop, then guess what happens? You keep going. So what we did is we said, look, we're going to play the amount that we have to play in order to get the necessary points in order to get the gift. And then once we get those necessary points, we get the gift and we get out of there. If there's a casino that we don't have to get a certain number of points for and we could just go in there and we get them, because we still like to play the slot machines, we'll go into those casinos. We hang out in there and we do, but we'll only play like $100, maybe $200 in that casino so we can get the gift. And what that does is it's some of us would say that it's prolonging the time in which we get rich from hitting a casino slot machine. But I would just say that it's giving us more time on the same amount of money. And because we're gonna gamble on the cruise, we're gonna gamble in this thing, and they give us, they give us at these casinos we go to, they give us free food and they give us snacks, they give us all kinds of stuff. So it's not like we're going, and we have an electric car. So in our electric car, we don't pay for gas, we don't pay for anything. We get down there and we're good to go. But what we can't do is we can't continue to gamble at the same clip because, again, as things start getting tighter and things start to buckle down, we just don't know how long it's going to last. And the reality is I didn't get to this place, and my wife didn't get to this place that we're at now by not having a conservative approach to our finances and how we deal with things and being smart. And so this is just an extension of that. And then the last thing that I think is important and I want to share with you, and again, there's a whole bunch more, but I'm not going to be alarmist because that's just not what I do. But the last thing I suggest that you do is stay informed. There's a lot of information out there. You have people, and again, I'm not going to go and I'm not going to go out and talk bad about people that have podcasts and stuff like that, because there's no benefit in that. But I will say there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of people will take a concept of a fact, and then purport that as fact, and then spread that around as fact when we all know it's bullshit. And so, but there's people that don't know any different, and because there might be a leaning one way or another, or a predisposition to want to believe something that this person says, a lot of times what ends up happening is we believe bad information, not because we believe in bad information, but because we've gotten this information from a source that we thought we can trust. So I suggest 100% of the time is to research the information that you're getting. If information is coming to you, one of the things that I do, for example, is on my social medias, there'll be some sensational story about a public figure. And it may be a public figure I like, it may be a public figure that I don't like. But just a simple practice that I have is I go on my phone and I go on Google and say, is that story showing anywhere in the news today? Because if it is, then there's a higher likelihood that there's some accuracy to it. But if not, then it's not. And I'm known for, I'm this guy where if we're in an argument about something, I'm really anchored in facts, probably in a way that is unhealthy, but I try to stay anchored in facts in my entire life. And so if we're having a conversation with something and it doesn't sound right, then what I'll do is I'll go to the Google and answer and then try to research the question. So I'll give you an example. I had a buddy of mine one day that came to me and said, hey, did you know that Bill Gates thinks math is racist? So it was one of those, I just kind of shook my head and I said, I never heard that. Where'd you hear that? I said, I'd like to hear the article or see the article before I pass judgment on that, because, there's a lot of things you could say about a lot of different people, but Bill Gates purporting that math is racist doesn't make sense to me. So it just didn't. And if it makes sense to you, fine. Let me know in the comments. But remember, keep it constructive, because otherwise you get booted out of there. And but my point is that, so then I go online, he sent me this article, and I looked at the article and I realized that this was a very, very politically leaning article. It appeared that way. So then I went and looked at the nonprofit organization that they were referencing. And did you know that what this nonprofit organization said is that they're exploring different ways to teach kids math because they're finding kids from different backgrounds may understand math a little bit differently. Now, I know there's going to be somebody, and I just don't have the patience for it today, so I apologize in advance. But that's going to say, well, 1 + 1 is always 2. It's like, yeah, math is always true, and 1 + 1 is always 2. But there's different ways to teach kids math. So if you think that the only way to teach kids anything is the way you were taught, then that means you're probably part of the problem. I mean, it is what it is. But I'll give you an example. One time when I went into my daughter's class for open house, every table had a number. And so what they said is, how many ways can you get to that number? So I think we were number 12. So I said, 3 times 4, 4 times 3, 8 plus 4, 10 plus 2, 14 minus 2, all of these ways to get to 12. And so when you're teaching kids math, are you trying to teach them the memorization of 1 + 1 is 2, or are you trying to teach them the logic and reasoning that comes from dealing with numbers? And if you're trying to teach the logic and reasoning to deal with numbers, then by looking at different ways to get to the same problem, you could solve that. And I suggest that part of our problem today in America is that people have a difficult time. Some people have a difficult time understanding there's more than one way to address an issue, and they think their way is the best way, even though it's not necessarily the only way. So I try to research information, because once I saw that, I went back to him and he was completely surprised. But I'm thinking to myself, like, why would you think that one of the most powerful people in America, one of the richest people in America, and again, I know today's just not the day, folks. I'm just going to put that out there. But the would be purporting that math in and of itself is racist, because you can't prove that. It's almost as dumb as what's his name saying 1 + 1 = 3. I mean, it just doesn't compute. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm not listening to people. When you're based in fact, as I am, it's easy for you to get pulled into rabbit holes, not because you want to argue, but because you find value in the truth and you want to make sure people have the truth. But what I started to find is that sometimes people just throw stuff out there just to see how it's going to respond. In a lot of cases, I think people were saying stuff they didn't even believe just because they just want to say it, or because they heard it, or because they're trying to do a code switch and tell me something different, which has happened a lot, not just personally, but professionally. Because the reality is racist people are cowards, and so they never really come up to you and say, hey, I'm racist. What they normally do is they'll do some passive aggressive stuff because they're too cowardly to come in front of you. So I'm just giving it to you straight, because today is not the day. So my thing is I just stopped listening to people. I just got to the point where I know what the facts are. I pay attention to the facts, and if somebody says something, I'll take it in. But if it sounds wrong, then I no longer litigate truth as it relates to some of this stuff, because sometimes when you tell people that tariffs, as an example, are going to create higher costs for American consumers, the first thing they do is they talk about how Biden didn't curb inflation. Well, we're not talking about Biden right now. And by the way, Biden did a lot for inflation. And by the way, we were in economic growth as opposed to recession, but we're not going to go down that path right now, because I'm not feeling it. And I keep reminding myself, I know I keep saying it, but I'm reminding myself more than I'm reminding you. But you have to, but I just got to the point where I'm just not going to, when people are trying to pull you, I just stopped listening to them, because I know that it's not factual. And the reality is if they really had an interest in the truth, they would either A, ask a question, or B, they would research it on their own. But it's not my job necessarily to educate everybody around me. And then the last one is, being honest with yourself and each other. I have a way where I try to bring people together, and I try to find solutions to problems, and sometimes to a detriment, because sometimes I have a way of trying to find common ground, even if there is no common ground. And sometimes people will get the impression that I'm behind something I'm not behind, and it's not that I'm behind it. It's just because I'm not fighting it as fiercely as I normally would, just for whatever reason. Maybe I don't have the energy, maybe I don't have the time, maybe I don't have the information. and maybe just not wanting to create too much of a stir. But I think that ultimately we're at a point in our time where the only thing that's going to carry us forward is going to be us living within our truth. And I do believe there are more good people in the world than bad people, and I do believe that most people are out for the common good. But I also think that people are looking out for what's good for them, and so, it almost becomes a conflict where there shouldn't be a conflict. Shouldn't be a conflict about whether or not you feed your family and how you treat other people. But that's how people feel it. That's how they go. But again, so the idea is just staying informed, being honest with myself, and really looking at things for where they are. As they say, when somebody shows you who they are, trust them. And I started to do that, and some people come, some people go. And, I've talked a lot about kind of that process in other videos on the channel. So I suggest you take a look at it, because there's a lot of enlightening stuff that you'll hear. It may not be as direct as a instructional video, but these aren't necessarily instructional videos. These are me kind of sharing what I've learned, and tips, and lacing you up with a little bit of game to help you get to where it is that you want to be. So with all that being said, I do want to stop with just some 5 key pieces of advice, non-professional advice, because again, I'm not a financial advisor, never played one on TV, but I do think these are things that are going to be able to help you, because they've helped me through the course of several recessions. And trust me, I have never been unscathed in a recession. So I'm not speaking as some guy sitting in the clouds. It's just not that type of situation. So my 5 pieces of non-professional advice. Number 1, don't panic. This too will pass. If you ever get to a point where you think something's permanent, just remember, one of the few things that people do is they're going to die. And if you're going to die, then that tells you that life is temporary. And if life is temporary, then why would any type of difficulty that happens in life be any different? Number 2, stick to the plan. You came up with a plan before you retired. You've been working on a plan up to this point. Would I say that it's wise for somebody who hasn't retired yet to retire today? Nah, I mean, that doesn't make sense. Why don't you go poke yourself in the eye with a blunt stick? But the other side of that is don't continue to just work another year for the sake of working another year. Because if you do that, then there's never going to be a perfect time. Right now may be a bad time, but then there'll never be a perfect time. But stick to the plan. Look at your plan and revise the plan however you need to revise it. But if you've retired already, then stick to your plan, improve your plan. And if you're not retired yet, then take a look at your plan and see if you need to revise it by a couple of months until you hit the comfort level that you want, or you hit the dollar number that you feel like you need according to your plan. The next one is, if you have stuff, as you go through and you look and you start to realize that you're not going to panic, but you're going to sell some stuff so you can make some money. Try to figure out, is there stuff around the house that you don't use? One of the things that we did early on in our retirement, and we've continued, is instead of throwing stuff away or taking stuff to the Goodwill, we sell it. And you'd be surprised at how much crap sits around these houses, and how much of that crap is stuff that's useful for somebody else. If you're like me, if something's in disrepair, I get rid of it. I throw it away. If it's not in disrepair, then it's good. It works. It works fine. I've sold record covers. I've sold turntables. I've sold household goods, all kinds of stuff. But I say that to say that even if you don't think you can use it, sell it or give it away. In our town, we have food pantries. And so I think I've talked about how we give away a lot of food to the food pantries, but I also realize that not a lot of people are 6'8". And so if I have clothes that are going to go to, if I'm going to, that I don't wear, then why not give those away? Why not sell those? Because clothes for somebody my size are a little bit more expensive, actually a lot bit more expensive. And there's a lot of people that just don't have the money to do it. So if I have a pair of jeans that I paid $80 for and I could sell them for $30 and somebody else gets a benefit from them, then guess what? I'm going to sell them. But now's the time, as you look at the big picture. The big picture is that everybody's got to tighten up one way or another. Unless you're in that 1%. And I just don't think the 1%ers are watching my YouTube channel. And they might be, and if you are, say hello in the comments, and then maybe I'll get 1 million followers and I'll be in the 1% like you. But no, the idea is that none of us are in the 1%. And so, we're all going to be impacted some way. And so when you look at this from the bigger picture perspective, what we're doing is we're really just recycling, taking stuff that we're not using here and moving it to somebody else and using that cycle until it's not able to be used anymore. And I think more people would benefit than you probably think. Number 4 is stay out of the rabbit holes. There's going to be a lot of people. The funny thing about difficult times, particularly difficult economic times, is that everybody feels like they have an answer. And the reality is very few people are even in those conversations. I'll give you an example. I know a guy that works at the Department of Energy. So we had this whole conversation, and he's telling me, yeah, the Department of Energy is not going to get hit by Doge because it's self-funded. And I said, well, I don't know that they're concerned about it being self-funded. No, they're not going to touch it, not going to touch it, not going to touch it. There's the Columbia Water Agreement or something that dictates how the U.S. and Canada deal. The Columbia River Pact, I think it's called. They deal with how they divvy up the water for energy across the Columbia River, which I guess runs on the border. Again, I don't know at all. I'm just going off of this, but I said, I don't think that's going to play a difference. And so here we are a few months later, and then they laid people off, brought people back, and went through the whole thing. Point being that if you just go down the rabbit hole or you just go down one piece of information, then you find yourself in a spot where you may not have all the information that you need to do what's best for yourself and your family. So my suggestion is that you just stay out of the rabbit holes and just continue to seek good information. If it's good information, hold on to it. If it's bad information, jettison it, just like everything else. And then the last thing I'll say is just get informed. Get informed. Try to understand where the information is. Try to understand what's happening out there in the world. Try to understand what causes things to happen. So why is a deficit so important to the national debt? And is the deficit even something that we could bring into control? And how does monetary policy impact that? And how does the value of the dollar and of global currencies impact that? It's just things like that. And again, I ask these questions because these are things that as I talk through it, I didn't know, and I thought I might want to know. So I think it's the same thing you might want to do. Just start asking yourself some of those questions, because if you're speaking the truth, there's less to remember, and it's easier to just have those conversations because you walk away saying, you know what, all right, you might want to fight with me, but I know what's true. And if you have that, then that brings you all the confidence that you need to have in that situation. So on that note, again, I just wanted to, when these things happen, I do feel fortunate that I've got 750 of you out here that are part of this community, that look for good information here. And when things like this happen, or when we get into times like this, I think it's easy to talk about early retirement, the things you need to do, and how to save money and all that. But I don't know about you, but I'm not really thinking about that right now. The only thing I'm thinking about is I don't have to go into the office tomorrow. But here's the fact of the matter, is that people say, well, you're retired, and then if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, where are you going to be? And I said, well, the thing is that if I was working and everything went to hell in a handbasket, it'd be just as bad. But I would have to deal with getting laid off from a job on top of everything else. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and cut it short. But, if you like this content, or you found this helpful, or if there's something that you'd like to have discussed on the channel, let me know. I'm open to discussing just about anything. I think I've mentioned before, I retired at 51. I've, got this time, and I'm just trying to share with people my journey in hopes that it inspires you to do the things that you want to do and live the life that you want to live. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.